All right. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Edlo podcast. As always, please subscribe. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up, and this one is one of the coolest. I remember, so I'll share a story here real quick. 1998. It was a Sunday, and I was there with my dad and my brother, and we just saw a preview for ECW pay per view, and we'd never seen ECW before. I had seen Sabu one time at an indie show and knew he was with ECW and heard some rumblings, and it was only $20. So we're like, let's go ahead and watch the show. And it was Heatwave 98. And the main event was the Dudleys versus Tommy Dreamer, Little Spike Dudley, and the Sandman. And the entire show was amazing, but the Dudley Boyz tore the house down. And I got every ECW pay-per-view every other month since then. And today, my guest is one of the guys who made me fall in love with ECW and the hardcore wrestling style, D-Von Dudley. D-Von, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Man, I got to tell you, for those who don't know wrestling, I don't think they understand how big of an impact the Dudley Boyz had, because you are legit. There is a legitimate argument that the Dudleys were the greatest tag team of all time.
Right.
And did you, when you got into wrestling, did you want to be a tag team wrestler?
No, I didn't. I was, I'm sorry, hold my daughter.
Don't apologize. I got kids. I know what that's like.
Go ahead, go see mommy. Go ahead. It normally happens. No, I was a big Hulk Hogan fan growing up in Brooklyn, New York. I basically I idolized Hogan, wanted to be just like Hogan. And I just remember, when I trained at Johnny Rods' gym in Brooklyn, New York, I always liked to do things like Hogan in the ring. And so when I got the phone call to ECW, I thought I was going to be the next Black Hulk Hogan. And it didn't work out that way, but I had, a lot of influence of Hogan. So I never really wanted to do tag team wrestling. I wanted to be like Hogan. I wanted to do exactly what Hogan did. And then when I got to ECW, I was told that I was going to be in a tag team with Bubba and 8 other guys. I was just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And, if you watch ECW, you know how that story went. And, I wound up falling in love, with the group and loved it. And still, I had that itch to become a singles wrestler. Not because I didn't enjoy being with Bubba, but because I had that itch to want to be that single star. And I think everybody has that in them in one way, shape, or form when they first break into the business. But I found out later on that you can achieve that stardom even in a tag team.
Yeah.
As long as you and the other person is on the same page and you're not butting heads with each other.
Yeah. Well, now that was what I was going to ask, because, I mean, man, it's actually quite a feat considering that you and Bubba stayed together and relevant for so long you had a couple of times where you kind of broke off and then came back. But really, I mean, the Dudleys were a draw for decades.
Right.
And that chemistry that you had, was it immediate? Did you guys know each other beforehand, or
no, we didn't. When I got the phone call to come down to try out at the ECW dojo in Long Island, New York, I got to the dojo and met Taz for the first time. Perry Saturn was there. And Bubba was totally different than what you see now. The bully, Bully Ray, Bubba Ray Dudley, he was a quiet, I'm not going to say, well, I can't say really quiet, but he was not the bully you see today. He was very humble. He was in a corner, actually. I guess he had just got finished training and he was sitting in the corner and didn't open his mouth, didn't say anything. And I remember after I was done with my trial, I went and introduced myself. I said, "How you doing? I'm Devon." He goes, "Hi, Bubba Ray Dudley." He didn't say Mark LaMonaco, Bubba Ray Dudley. He kept in character. So I was like, okay, I didn't know his real name then. And he was very, like I said, he was very humbled and things like that. When you went through the ECW dojo with Taz and Perry Saturn, you were going to be humbled.
Mm,
And regardless if you thought you were a badass or not, you were going to find out that there was somebody better than you.
mm.
Especially in ECW, there was a bunch of misfits in ECW. There really
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
but dangerous misfits, I should say.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of guys like, I mean, in fact, where I'm at, I've had a lot of dealings with Mustafa Saeed, and
Hmm.
the gang, the original gangsters. They were, he had lots of stories about him and New Jack and the things that they did and whatnot. And it seemed like that time frame. And the thing that I loved, I think, what carried through when I was watching ECW, that was in the time when, I mean, I started my wrestling training in '98 at a little place here with Paul DeMarco and Oliver John. I ended up finishing with Johnny Jeter just actually last year. I took a long break, but everybody was hungry. You could tell, like everybody in ECW. I mean, I remember that first pay per view when I watched you guys. You guys got on the thing, and Bubba was just challenging everybody. We'll wrestle anyone in the WWE, anyone in WCW, anyone who wants to come. And I was just like, wow, this is different. It was different.
Long and behold, we didn't know about teams like the Acolytes,
Yeah,
Bradshaw and Farouk. I think we would have rethought that idea of wrestling anybody,
yeah.
because we all know the beating that Public Enemy took when
Mm-hmm.
they went to WWE because they decided to change the finish on
Mm-hmm.
how the match was going to end with Bradshaw and Farouk, and you just don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, Bradshaw is a big, rugged, guy that could go and ready to go at the drop of a dime, and Farouk will just kill you. I mean, just kill you.
uh,
No other questions behind it. He was just that strong. He was just that massive, and even today, uh, I find myself being very humbled to Ron. Ron was like a father figure. He kept me at a go, or I should say, he kept me at peace during the
mm,
whole Reverend Devon
mm,
debacle.
mm,
He was the one that told me, you're doing a great job. There are certain people that are in the company right now that don't want to see you succeed. That's what's going on. He goes, I'm telling you, the character is getting over. And I
mm,
and I was agreeing with him because I was doing promos with Vince
mhm,
um, that we were only doing in one take.
mhm,
And again, I've said this publicly, and I'll say it again. Triple H at the time would have never laid down for me in the middle of the ring on SmackDown if he thought the character wasn't working or it was garbage.
mm,
He had that type of pull back then.
mhm, mhm.
Again, I'm not saying that it wasn't somewhat of a work in progress because it was. I was just learning how to get on my feet as a singles competitor after being in a tag team for so long. But that was that was something, to
Yeah.
actually go through that, and for Farouk to take me under his wing and keep me calm, cool, and collective, and to tell me it's not he would say it all the time, Devin, it ain't you, it's them. Don't worry
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah.
He would always tell me because Farouk is a straight shooter. He's not going to BS you at all.
Mhm,
If he feels that you're wrong, he's going to tell you you're wrong. And
mhm.
I asked him on many occasions. He kept saying, "Devin, stop asking me. Devin, I told you." I was just like, "Yes, you did, sir."
Yeah.
And he when I look back at it, he was so right. Him, Rikishi, they
Mhm,
both were there during that time of the Reverend Devon angle, and was telling me what things to watch out for. And the thing about it was, they're not Nostradamus, but
mhm,
each week that went by, they would say, "Watch, I guarantee you this will happen," and sure enough, it would happen. It
mm,
wasn't things that I wanted to hear or like because it was my career, but they were right in how
mhm,
the powers that be at that time were in charge and what they were doing.
mm,
So I thank Farouk and Rikishi all the time
mm,
for their help during that time, and it was just those two hold a special place in my heart, which is why when I became a producer backstage for WWE, I had always made it known to the Usos how I would help them in any way, shape, or form because of what their father did for me. I was going
Mm-hmm.
to do for them. If it meant putting my neck out on the line, voicing my opinion about them in the meetings with Vince, that I was going to do that, just out
Mm-hmm.
of sheer respect of what Rikishi did for me.
Wow. Now, your time as a producer in the WWE, how was that, and what did you learn from
Well, I learned that I didn't like it at first. I hated
that?
it.
What
Hated
did
it,
you hate about it?
Well, the thing about it is, when you're a producer, you can't do what you normally would do if you were talent. In other words,
Mm,
Vince would come to me and say, me and Bubba, I want this done in the ring tonight and blah, 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 and so forth and so on. Okay, not a problem. We go in and we do it. We knew
mhm,
how to do it. We didn't have to walk through it step by step.
mm, mhm,
We knew
mhm,
exactly if whatever it was, nothing was ever too difficult.
mhm,
So, nobody had to hold our hands and whatever. Some talent you had to do that with because they weren't ready
mm,
to be on that level. And at
mm,
that time, the company was trying to push these guys a lot faster than they should have, just
mm,
because either they had to get them out there because they were paying them, a
mm,
boatload of money, so they had to get their money back in some way. I don't know, but I know that it just it felt like I was handcuffed in the very beginning
mm, mhm,
because I would say things and I would assume that they would automatically know what to do. And when it didn't come out that way on TV, I was pulled aside and said, Devon, you've got to work with these guys. You got to somewhat hold their hand, and you got to
mm,
go step by step. And that's not something I was used to. I
mm,
was used to, you tell me what to do and I'll just do it. I don't need anything else.
mm,
And but as time went on, I learned the system and learned how it worked. It was also kind of difficult with Vince in a sense because Vince was very, it's not talent's fault, it's the producer's fault.
mm,
And I'm
mhm.
just like, wait a minute. I'm like, I'm telling these guys what to do, and they're not doing it. And
Yeah,
it wasn't all the talent. It was just some talent that was very green and
yeah,
very young and did not know how to get over.
mhm,
And that
mhm,
was the problem. Some of them did not know how to get over. A lot of them did. Some of them
mhm,
just didn't, and it was the producer's fault. If they didn't, or
yeah,
if something went wrong, so you had to make sure that whatever assignment Vince gave you, that it had to work. Because if it
mhm,
didn't, that was your behind.
mhm,
You were going to pay the ultimate price for it. So, at first I didn't like it. I hated it. I remember when Hunter, Triple H, pulled me aside and asked me, did I want to become a producer? And at first I told him, I said no. I said I still wanted to wrestle.
mm,
And because Bubba decided that he didn't want to stay any longer in the company and he wanted to move on and do other things, I was kind of stuck.
yeah,
So I pretty much told him, I said, well, do I have a choice? And he says, not really. The old man wanted both of you. And, you know, we understand that you're playing ball, but, Bubba wanted to leave and do his own thing, which is fine. I get that. No
mhm,
one's forcing him to stay or what have you at that time in
mhm,
2016. He had other ventures, other things he wanted to do, which was fine. But then I was stuck. So
yeah,
it was kind of like, all right, what do I do? Do I try to go to Japan? And at
mhm,
that time, I was in the middle of a nasty divorce. So I
yeah,
did not want to go and do that. I didn't want to have to get on a plane for 17 hours and then have to come back because I had to go to court or something for the divorce.
right,
Um, and I was in a kind of bitter feud, a custody battle with my son.
mm,
And it was kind of like stressful. So what do I do? And it got to the point where I said, okay, I'll take the producer's role. And I remember Triple H said, Devon, I'm going to tell you, like I tell a lot of people that come into this role, you're going to have to learn how to eat shit and like it. You really
mm,
are. You're going to have to learn how to like it. You're going to have to marinate that steak as good as possible and put that shit all over it and taste it and love it. And
mm,
he was right. He was right. When you work for Vince, that's what you have to do. There's going to be a lot of things that you didn't like. There was going to be a lot
mm,
of things that you didn't agree with. But because this is his sand, it was his sandbox at the time, you got to play by his rules, regardless if it's
Mhm.
right, wrong, and indifferent. You've got to do what that man says. He writes the paychecks. He's the one that's going to give you and make you keep your job or lose your job. So you do
Mhm.
what he says, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wanted to ask you about this because I got to imagine. So I served a mission for my church, for 2 years in 2000 to 2002, and I had to be alone with a guy who I didn't really know that well as my companion, 24/7 for 6 weeks or 3 months. You and
Right.
you and Bubba were around each other for what 22, 23 years. I mean, nonstop. I got to imagine that there were times that had to be hard. Were you guys always kind of in like were you guys always on the same page, or were there times where you weren't? And how did you work through that?
I mean, there were times that we weren't. There were times that we've had arguments and that we didn't agree. We didn't agree on everything. There were
Hmm.
things that we disagreed upon. But for the sake of the team and making money, we knew somehow or another we had to come to a compromise. I don't think either one of us had a big head to where we were like, we're not going to do this. I'm not going to do this.
Hmm.
Even if it got to the point where we were butting heads and we just didn't agree, one of us would give in and go, you know what, fine, let's do it your way.
Hmm.
And that's the way it was.
Hmm.
Um, we just made sure that we had to be on the same page. And at one point, we traveled together all the time. We rode together all the time. We ate together all the time. We roomed with each other all the time. And I remember it had to be about 6, 7 months into WWE where we started to separate from each other because you're around somebody that long, you tend to get on each other's nerves, and
Yeah.
regardless to what type of compromise you might try, it's just not going to work. So you need a break. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what we did for a long time. He wound up hanging out with Shane McMahon, Dreamer, and Spike. And at one point before we did that, it was us, me and Bubba and The Rock.
Mhm.
We would drive together into the different towns and have good times. Tommy Dreamer was part of that. And again, at one point, it was myself, Bubba, Shane, and Tommy.
Mhm.
Um, and then, we all went our separate ways at one point. I wind up being with Maven,
Mhm.
uh, Umanga,
Mhm.
Randy Orton, and Batista, and Dawn Marie.
Mhm.
So that was my crew after Bubba and I had separated on the road, um, and kind of, started traveling by ourselves and doing things by ourselves. And it made it very delightful because we weren't underneath each other.
Mhm.
Um, to the point where we couldn't stand each other. We actually had a break, and so when we got to the building, it was like, "Hey, what's going on? How you doing? How's everything?" And boom, we went straight to business.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Sometimes you need that break and just be able to give yourself some time to, I'm sure that doesn't mean you don't love each other. It just means that, you need a little bit of a rest. I mean, you hear that with rock bands, you hear that with marriages, you hear that with everybody. Sometimes you just need a little break, and that's okay. So,
Well, you hear that with siblings, brothers and
yeah.
sisters, fighting
Yeah.
amongst each other, but you separate them, let them
Hmm.
go their separate ways for a little bit, then bring them back, and then they're like brand new again. You know,
Yeah.
I will always, have a special place in my heart for Bubba because him and I did so much together in terms of business.
Hmm.
Him and I helped create the Dudleys.
Yeah.
Um, one could not have done without the other.
Hmm.
And I strongly believe that in terms of making the tag team work. I don't know if we could have had success outside of the team with other people. Excuse me. I I feel that we were together for a reason.
Hmm.
And even though right off the bat, like Bubba likes to say, we clicked right off the bat, but I don't think we did. I think there were some mishaps along the way. But I think we got that ironed out real quick to where we started just gelling together.
Hmm.
Um, I think if you don't figure that out in the very beginning of the tag team, it'll never work because
Hmm.
you'll always be butting heads and you won't know how to compromise. And
Mm.
I had kids, to
Hmm.
take care of and things like that in the family, and so it seemed like I was always the one compromising, you
Right.
know, because I knew what was at stake. It was
Hmm.
time to make money. It was time to go out there and do our thing and to feed the family.
Hmm.
So a lot of times, I would give in even when I didn't want to give in because for the sake of the team and for the
Hmm.
sake of the family. Didn't
Yeah.
mean I didn't mean that I didn't care for Bubba. Like as far as I was concerned, he was like a legitimate brother.
Hmm.
Someone that yes, we fight against each other, but yet don't let anybody else do that.
Yeah.
Because we'll have each other's back through thick and thin, no matter what.
Yeah. You mentioned your kids, and we earlier saw one of your little ones run in here, and I know that you got a few. You have four from your previous marriage. Is that right?
No, I have three.
Three from your previous marriage, and you have how many from your current
I,
situation?
I have I have three. Three right now. I
Oh,
have two little girls, and I have two little girls, and my son was just born.
oh, wow! Congratulations, man.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
six. I got like six kids. That's a lot, but I wanted to ask you.
Well,
I have
people
four
ask me all the
myself.
time. Well, actually, I have seven.
Oh,
I have three from my first wife,
uh-huh.
which was the twins' mom,
Hmm.
the twins who are wrestling now,
Hmm.
and my son Matthew, who's
Hmm.
actually at the wrestling school wrestling.
Oh, okay.
Uh, that's from my first wife, and then I got married to my second wife, which I really shouldn't have done that. my, my second wife was only to get over my first wife.
uh,
It
uh,
took me a long time to admit that, but it was the truth. I only married her to get over my first wife because
mhm,
my first wife was my high school sweetheart, and we
mhm,
had the twins, and we had my third child. So it was very hard when the breakup happened. So I figured,
mhm.
hell, let me go meet somebody else out there and get married, and have a baby. I'll forget all about the first one, and all that did was bring problems.
Right. Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
that did was bring problems.
So you have seven, and what I wanted to say is, so I have a sister. My parents are still together, but I have a sister who's 21 years younger than me. My dad is
Mm-hmm.
a recovering drug addict, so he cleaned up when I was about 17, 18 years old, and then not. So I look at my sister, and like she's got the dad I kind of always wanted. Not that
Mm-hmm.
there's animosity there, but I'm just like, okay, you got a different deal than I do. And I got to
Mm-hmm.
imagine with your older kids, you were on the road so much, and now you're not really on the road as much as you were, right? You're kind
No,
of doing
no. Well,
so.
here's the deal. Here's the deal with that. With the twins and Matthew, the 22-year-old, I had them like 7 years apart.
Mm,
So they were only
mm,
7 years apart. And when I was home, I was home.
mhm,
I didn't go out and hang out with the guys. I didn't go out and do wherever I went, they went.
mm,
So yes, I was absent for a lot of things, but I made it all the birthdays, believe it or not. How I did that, I don't know.
mm,
The graduations, I was there for all of that.
mhm,
Um, there were a lot of times where I wasn't home, but I was home, when it counted.
mm,
And so I don't think that they were cheated at all.
mm,
The first three, and then my son with my second wife, she, I was in TNA, and that was when I was having problems with the
mm,
company,
mm,
with the whole Dixie regime.
mm,
I was having problems behind the scenes, so I was home a lot during that time. So I
mm,
got to see the 15-year-old grow up, during that time. And then,
mm,
of course, the last three with my wife now, I'm home a lot more. So
mm,
it's safe to say, I don't think that they were cheated in the sense like, say, during the Hogan and Andre era, where like
mm.
Piper and them, they were going like 30 to 40 days straight,
Yeah.
it was only home for a week. That
Mm,
was a brutal time
mhm,
in pro wrestling when you had a family.
mm,
Um, the Attitude Era, it was still rough,
mhm,
but at the same token, it wasn't as harsh and brutal as the Hogan and Andre era. I mean, we
mm,
understand we flew everywhere.
mhm,
It wasn't like back in the day when they had to drive 600, 700 miles cross country,
mhm,
to make a shot. You get on a plane and you just fly to the town, and that cuts out, almost 10 hours of your driving.
Right,
10 to 15 hours. So it was a little different
mm,
during the Attitude Era. Yes, although I was gone, like I said, 300 days, 250, 300 days out of the year. But when I was home, I was home. And I
yeah.
made sure that the kids, knew their father.
Yeah. Well, and that obviously, I mean, the fact that your kids are all, your three older kids are all in the business or working on being in the business tells them that they don't resent it for not having you around. It sounds like you guys are, that you're still close.
Yeah, we're still close. The twins and I are still close. They live in Georgia now.
Mm,
They, done a lot of stints in AEW.
mm,
They were there, and they're looking forward to maybe even possibly working there.
mm,
Matthew, the 22-year-old, he kind of moved back in with
mm,
me here.
mm,
And he basically is at the wrestling school that I have in Winter Park,
mm,
Devon Dudley Academy. He's there training uh,
mm,
and trying to follow in the footsteps of myself and his brothers.
mm.
And the 15/16-year-old, he wants nothing to do with wrestling. He wants to, thank God, he wants nothing to do with it.
What's he
Um,
into?
he's into basketball.
Oh, nice.
Excuse me.
I'm
He can tell
so
you.
so I'm a,
He can
I'm a
tell you.
I played basketball myself, and so I'm a
Yeah.
big fan. Yeah,
I mean, he can tell you every stat of anybody in the NBA, and is very accurate with it and very
yeah,
correct. I was shocked. I called him out on it one day, and he was actually right. I was
yeah.
looking up for, but he's into basketball. He loves that, and my daughter, who's 5, the oldest daughter, she's into gymnastics. So she
Oh,
loves gymnastics. And unfortunately, she loves going to the wrestling school. I hate that. And I'm trying to change that. And my 3-year-old slash soon to be 4 years old next week, she's like a dentist a minute. She just likes destroying things. So there's no telling what she's gonna want to do. And my
it's. Oh, go ahead. Your
I
son.
was gonna say, and my son is, he was just born, so hopefully I can lead him in the direction of playing basketball or maybe even football.
Yeah, it's funny. My son, my 17-year-old son, he plays. He's a senior year. He's on the varsity at his high school, and he's into it too. And we're here in Sacramento, the Kings. It's nice to finally have a winning team. We've had a bad his whole life. They've been bad, and they just made the playoffs this last year, which got him into it. And so, ask your son what he thinks of Demonis Sabonis. I think he's probably top 3 centers in the league right now. I mean, he's almost averaging a triple double every night, like Jokic. So, but he
Well,
doesn't
I
get a lot
wish
of
he
play.
was here. I wish he was here. I'd have you have a conversation with him because,
Yeah,
I mean, he's probably out there playing basketball now. I mean, whenever he's not home, he's on the basketball court, which is great.
yeah,
And, I was talking with my oldest sons who played basketball when they were younger, and he was like, "Man, Preston's better than us." He was like,
yeah,
"He can really play," and I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, he can really play. He's good." So listen, if he ever had dreams to go to the NBA, I would be all for it. But I never wanted my kids to be in this business. I always
hmm,
prevented them and steered them in the other direction. But the first three, unfortunately, got the bug.
yeah. So tell me, that's interesting. I did a podcast with Tito Santana, and I asked him. I said, "Would you do anything differently?" And he was kind of like, yeah, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have been in the business. I'd have done something else. And it's interesting to hear you say I'm trying to steer my kids away from the business. So I'm curious, what
Mhm.
is it about the business that makes you want to steer them away from
Well, the politics are brutal. And again, you can get politics anywhere in any 9 to 5, any corporate job. But, the way the business is now is totally different from when I broke into the business. It's a lot harder.
it?
And it seems that the level of respect is gone.
Mm,
And I'm not just saying from the young people to the vets, but I'm just saying all around, the respect just seems to be gone. For people who you thought were your friends are not your friends.
mm,
Um, quick to stab you in the back and things like that. And I've seen a lot of that, even just especially working behind the scenes.
mm,
Somebody talks about this one, and then next thing you know, you're in catering, and then with each other, and they're kissing them. Hey, how you doing? You know, kissing their behinds and, oh man, I miss you, man, and this and that, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, you were just talking about them like a dog in front of me.
Yeah, man, that's rough. And it's hard when you're not that way. Like
Yeah.
when you're just naturally a loyal person. I mean, you have to be naturally loyal to be in a tag team for 2 to 3 decades, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
have to be loyal. Um, and so I'm sure it's hard for you if when you're not wired that way to see that happening.
Yeah, and I mean, Bubba and I did not have the success that we've had over the years by not being somewhat loyal to each other.
Mhm.
And I always like to say, yes, we were known as the greatest tag team in the history of this business. But I like to correct people when they say that. I don't feel that we were the greatest tag team of all time. And I say this in every interview because I wanted to get out. The dirt sheet writers love to talk about crap that I didn't really mean to say,
Mhm.
but they won't, make it a point to put this out there. As far as I'm concerned, there's been so many tag teams before Bubba and I. The Road Warriors, the Steiner
Mhm.
brothers, um, Harlem Heat, the British Bulldogs, the Hart Foundation, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, Dr. Death Steve Williams in Japan that, tore it out the box. The Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express. I mean, I can go on for days about great tag teams, Demolition, Legion of Doom. Like I said earlier, the Powers of Pain. So many, great tag teams that came before us, and we never had the opportunity to work with.
Mhm.
So what I like to say is we're not the greatest tag team of all time. We're the greatest of our era.
Mhm.
I like to
Yeah.
say we're the greatest tag team of our era, not of
Yeah.
all time, but our era. And some people still dispute me when I say that. And thank you for the compliment, but I just don't feel unless we have been in the ring with all of those guys that I've mentioned and had success, I just don't think that we can say we're the greatest
Mhm.
of
You
all
know,
time.
let me say, sometimes, like I look at myself sometimes, and I think to myself, I go, man, I should have been born 10, 15 years earlier. You know what I mean? Like, do you ever wish that you like, man, I wish we just like a decade earlier had broke in and we could have had feuds with all those guys. Do you ever feel that way? Or
Not
because
really. Not.
yeah,
I mean, I had so much fun during the Attitude Era. I really did. But I
yeah,
also know being in the time of the Hogan and Andre, the Dusty and Flair era, that was a brutal time. There was a
yeah,
lot of hate. There was a lot of hazing going on.
yeah,
If the locker room didn't like you, they made life a living hell. And I know they did that a lot in the Attitude Era, but they were more brutal back then.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I've heard horror stories during
Mm,
the Hogan and the Andre era in WWE, and horror stories in the Dusty and Flair era.
mm,
So I think God made me exactly where I was supposed to be. He
yeah,
gave, they always say God gives you as much as you can handle. And I think the Attitude Era was what I could handle. That's
yeah.
why he put me
Well,
where he put me.
well, you know what? I got to tell you, I remember this kind of popped into my mind. You talk about that. I can't remember what year it was. You guys were in TNA and you finally had a tag match against the Steiners on pay per view that was coming up. And I
Hmm.
bought the pay per view specifically to see that match. And I can't remember which one of them, but one of them ended up injured or didn't make it. And they
It was
brought
Scott.
in, yeah. And so you brought in the Road Warrior Animal to be the tag partner. And I thought, you know what? There's nobody better to if you can't get the Steiners, bringing an animal would have been perfect for that. But I was kind of bummed that match didn't happen. You know?
Yeah, Scott was in Puerto Rico, and I forgot what happened. Something happened with his lungs, one
Mhm.
of his lung, and he almost died.
Yeah,
He was in the hospital in Puerto Rico and could not fly back home.
mm,
He was in ICU. From what Scott, I remember Scott was telling me they thought he wasn't going to make it. It was
yeah,
that brutal, that bad.
mm,
And of course, we had advertised that match, the Steiners against the Dudleys. What were we going to do? And then someone came up with the idea, well, let's see if Animal will do it.
yeah,
And, we lit up. We
Yeah.
were so happy because that was a dream match for us, the Road
Mhm.
Warriors.
Yeah.
And to see Rick and Animal decide who was going to take the heat, it was priceless. Because you heard the stories back in the day when those two teams used to go at each other. Who's going to take the heat? You take the heat. No, I'll take the heat. No, you take the heat. Back and forth. So to actually see them do that, it was priceless. It was like we needed popcorn just to sit back and watch it. Oh, it
Yeah.
was great. It was great. And I remember, I think it was Rick, had said, "Damn it, Animal, you just don't change, do you?" He was like, "God, this is not 1980s." It was funny. It was really hilarious. I remember
You know,
me and Bubba just went, "Damn, thank God we weren't back then."
yeah. Well, and I gotta ask, there's gotta be over the course of your career, man. I mean, especially, you have done literally, I think, everything possible. Were there ever moments where you got to just sit there and soak it in and just be like, I could pinch myself right now? Was there a moment you can remember like that?
I think that there were certain times where, yes, there was, but I don't think I took it in the way I should have taken it in.
Mm,
Um, I think because when I look back at it now, I can't believe that everything is over. I mean, it's
mm,
not completely over, but the height of my career is pretty much over.
mhm,
And the top of the success is somewhat over. I basically um, should have taken it in a little bit more.
mm,
Excuse me, than what I did. Because I guess I was one of those guys that always thought that it was going to last forever, and that
mm,
I would wrestle forever, and it was never going to go away. But
mm,
now that I sit back, after having back surgery and all of that, it's like, wow. And I mean, I made a comeback at the 1000 episode,
mhm,
for TNA, and it was great. I felt great. I was in there doing it, but I also knew that the height of my career was over,
mhm,
and that I wasn't that same Dudley boy that I was back in ECW. And when I first came into WWE, I was a step slower
mhm.
than I was, before I left. So, but that, father time waits for no one, and it
Yeah.
all catches up to you. So to actually know that it's over, it's like, damn, I wish I would have just sat back and really, enjoyed it, because I just thought it was going to last forever. There were times, like, for instance, I remember when Bubba and I first came back to WWE, we wrestled the Usos at WrestleMania in Dallas in front of 110,000 people. I remember right before we went out, the Usos went out, and Bubba said to me, he goes, "Devon, capture this moment, because you will never probably see it again. This will probably be the last time we wrestle in front of a crowd like this. So breathe it in. Don't rush down to the ring so fast. Take a look as you're coming down the aisle, and just look and take it all in. And if you go back and watch that match, you see me stop when I walked out of the curtain, and I'm just looking around, and I'm going, good God, 110,000 people.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was like, it was unreal,
Mhm,
so I never got a chance to do that at the TLC match, in
mhm,
front of 80,000 people. I never got to do that, excuse me, in Toronto, none of that. I never thought about doing that until that match,
mhm.
until that day, until Bubba said something, and then I was able to do it.
Yeah. I gotta ask, so there are so many people who try to make it in the business and don't make it. And I gotta say, the Dudley Boys definitely didn't look like the tag team of the 90s that Vince liked or were the guys at the top. And you guys just busted that door down. I mean, it did, I know the story is that, you got your balls busted a little bit when you got there at the beginning because some people didn't like you, Bradshaw, these different guys. But I'll tell you from a fan who was watching it, you guys got over pretty quick. I mean, like people knew who you were and people were ready for it. When you put Mae Young through that table, it was over. You know what I mean? And my question for you really is what makes you different than everybody else that you were successful when so many other people aren't?
Well, Bradshaw, I gotta correct you. Bradshaw did like us. He just
Okay.
tested us.
Okay.
Everybody, we came from ECW, and so did the Public Enemy. So they didn't know if we were gonna have the same chip on our shoulder like Public
Mhm.
Enemy did. So we
Mhm.
were tested. We
Mhm.
were tested from Bradshaw and Ron. We were tested by Bob Holly.
Mhm.
We were tested by anybody we got in the ring with at that time, just to see what type of people we were.
Mhm.
And when they realized that we were good guys and, we were hard workers and, we knew our craft and we were ready to study it and learn, that was when, the gloves came off and they were like, these guys are okay.
Mhm.
We basically absorbed knowledge
Mhm.
from those who had came before us. And I think that's what's lacking with the new generation. They
Mhm.
think they know everything. They think they can do it and not still learn. We didn't think that way. Anytime there was a time to talk to Pat Patterson, we would
Mhm.
grab him and talk to him and try to absorb his brain like a sponge because of
Mhm.
just how good Pat Patterson was, especially coming up with finishes and stuff like that. I know Bubba was hit with him a lot more than I was, but he learned so much from Pat.
Mhm.
God rest his soul. He was just a straight genius
Mhm.
when it came to stuff like that. So taking the time to learn your craft, even when you have made it to the big dance and you're still studying, I think that is what actually helped us to succeed and to be still on top because we were on the same page. We wanted to be better, with
Mhm.
all due respect. We wanted to be better than those that came before us, not out of ego, or pride, but just the fact that we wanted to learn so much that we wanted to be great. We
Mhm.
wanted to be put in that same category. We wanted to be on a lot of people's Mount Rushmore, so to speak, of
Mhm.
tag
Mhm.
team wrestling.
Yeah.
And, and we did it, but it was a hard road to get there. The Dudley gimmick wasn't the greatest gimmick in the world for us, because the Dudley gimmick, when it first was put together by Raven and Taz and ECW, it was meant to be a joke,
Mhm.
never to be taken seriously. Bubba dancing and stuttering, Chubby Dudley eating himself to death, Sign Guy Dudley, who was a mute, Spike,
Mhm.
who was freaking on an acid trip, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So many different Dudleys that came, but it was it was one big joke.
Mhm.
And, I came along and changed all of that and made the Dudleys serious.
Yeah.
You know, um, that's something I love to take pride in, to know that I helped change how the Dudley Boys were supposed to be looked upon
Mhm.
and taken seriously because, again, we knew the talent that we had and we wanted to show the people what we can do. We tried to steal the show every single night.
Yeah. And you guys did. I mean,
Mhm.
your gimmick is specifically that kind of Pulp Fiction, Samuel L. Jackson character. You could feel it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
When you didn't have to say much, and you could feel it. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
The character came from Pulp Fiction, Samuel L. Jackson, Jules,
Mhm.
and it also came from Mr. T,
Mhm.
from Rocky 3.
Oh yeah.
Me, when I was punching people in the corner or hitting them down, talking the crap to them, it was the same thing that Mr. T did in Rocky 3. I
Mhm.
idolized Mr. T, loved Mr. T's character. And when I
Mhm.
met him, I remember him and I were going back and forth in the back in Carolina, doing the Rocky skit together. And he's a character, boy. He was in full gimmick. He was in full character. It was great. I enjoyed that time with Mr. T, and told him how I idolized him growing up, and how as a kid I memorized every word he said in Rocky 3, and
Mhm.
used to go around the schoolyard saying it,
Yeah.
and doing it, and for it to become a part of me and the character that I played on TV, it was great.
Yeah. That's funny. My favorite series is the Rocky series. In fact, I've been working real hard to try to get Carl Weathers on this podcast. I've worked real hard, and I'm like this close. Hopefully, going to get him on. But
Listen,
but
if you get him on the show, bring me on there with you. I want to be on there with me.
yeah, I'll get your info, and I will do that. I will do that
Oh
if I get him
God,
on. Devon will be on there with me. Yeah, no,
yes.
yeah, because that I'm a big Rocky fan, and there's something that Carl Weathers said, and I wanted to ask you about this because to do what you've done, you have to be a warrior. And if you know Rocky IV, there's this line that when he's talking to Rocky about retirement, and he says, "When a warrior doesn't have a war to fight, the warrior might as well be dead." And
Hmm.
I imagine someone that's achieved so much as you now have to find other ways to achieve. Otherwise, you kind of go stir crazy. So, what are you doing now that you have extra time? I know you got your wrestling school, but what else are you kind of focusing on?
Well, the wrestling school is definitely one big thing. Getting these students to learn how to become professional wrestlers, and learn the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, um, focusing. I have a detailing business in Fort Lauderdale.
Mm,
That's one, and I think again one of the major things um, is my kids, my
mm,
family. You
yeah,
know, I love being home. You know what drives people crazy? The screaming, the yelling, the what have you. I enjoy it. You know, people go,
yeah,
"You're crazy." I'm not crazy. That's just what I enjoy.
yeah,
You enjoy, like I tell Bubba all the time. You enjoy the freaking, hairband. Big tit girl, blonde, big titty girls. And all
mm-hmm,
of that. I enjoy rocking my kids to sleep. I enjoy calming them down when they lose their mind. That's
yeah,
my enjoyment.
yeah,
You and I have two different type of enjoyments, my friend. What you consider being crazy and obnoxious and whatever, I consider smooth and soothing. And
yeah,
that's just me. I
yes.
can't have that.
You know what's funny about that about having kids. I love the fact. So none of my kids, like my boys and I, we love pro wrestling. We're going to WrestleMania 40. I got them that for Christmas. We're going to go to Philadelphia
Oh,
to
in
see it.
Philadelphia, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
but like they have no interest in getting into wrestling. You know what I mean? But they all have found something that they're passionate about, and it's fun to see. I don't even know where they get this stuff. You know what I mean? Like some of this stuff. Like I have a daughter who's really into theater. I have a daughter who's really into painting. And
Hmm.
my son's into basketball. My other son is into it too. They just it's really cool to watch kids uh grow up and become humans, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really
So
is.
yeah, it makes you laugh. You just sit there and sometimes you see things that are from you, and sometimes you're like, where did that person come from? It's kind of
Yeah.
nice. So now so you're focusing on the training, and I wanted to ask you about this. I think personally, and you tell me your thought on this. Like the reason why I took such a long time to go and train again was because here in Sacramento, there you could go to 1,000 different wrestling schools, but you're going to be trained by a guy who was 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 trained by a guy who trained at the Hard Dungeon. You know what I mean? And it's like who've never been anywhere outside of 40 miles, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, do you think that if you really want to get in the business, you got to be with somebody who actually made it somewhere?
Absolutely. I preach that all the time. I've said that. I said, listen, don't go to a school that the person has never been anywhere or done anything. Because remember, they're the same people that tried to be where you're trying to get to, but yet they didn't make it. So they
Mm-hmm.
decided to get a warehouse, put a ring in there, and call it a wrestling dojo or a school
Mm-hmm.
and try to teach you how to get to where you want to be. But isn't that funny how they can't do the same thing for themselves, but they can do
Mm-hmm.
it for you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wish the
Yeah.
dirt sheet writers would print that, things I say, as opposed to saying that, oh, Devon's infatuated with Stephanie McMahon. And it was like they took that out of content. It was like, good God. I didn't mean it was the wrong choice of word. I should have said admire Stephanie McMahon. But they ran with it. Oh my God, Triple H. Devon's after your wife. Oh my God, man, bitch, shut up. I am not after his wife. I admire Stephanie. I think she's one of the greatest people in the world, one of the soothing people, but I was not trying to get with Stephanie. Good God, what is wrong with you people?
Well, that's funny. Dirt sheet writers, especially right now with all this CM Punk business, I think it's
Hmm.
really they're kind of showing their colors. Some of these guys, you clearly are on one side or the other and are skewing their quote unquote reporting to based on who they're friends with, you know.
Right.
And so, do you have a guy that's like a dirt sheet writer that you're like, you know what, that guy's okay?
I like Mike Johnson.
Oh yeah,
Well,
PW
that's
Insider is
.com.
my favorite place to go. Yeah,
I like those guys. Those guys tell what's up. If you read it from them, it's the truth.
yeah,
And the thing I like about them is that they will not print it if it ain't true. They're gonna hear both sides of the story before they print it. And
yeah,
that's what I give a lot of respect to Mike Johnson. I love him as a sheet writer. I love him as a journalist,
yeah.
so to speak. Um, but a lot of the other guys, I have no respect. Again, when I had the back surgery, or better yet, I had my stroke in 2019, and
Mhm,
I wasn't. I mean, I fully recovered from it. My
mhm,
blood pressure was high and all of that, so it caused me to go, to have a stroke. Working behind the scenes, it was brutal because I was
mhm.
so stressed out, and like I said, I had the stroke and all of that. They had me dying. It
Yeah,
was like 1 foot on the ventilator. Oh, Devon is all, he's not gonna make it. And I'm like, why would you say that?
yeah,
I got family members calling my wife, crying. Is this true what I'm reading? It's like you're only doing it to get
mhm.
them to, tell people, oh, I read this on such and such dirt sheet. Really?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
that, you gotta put and then another thing was, so I got angry about it. And I said, if I said I was gay, then
yeah,
you would print that, right? If
yeah,
I told you, if I told you I was going to be on a RuPaul's drag queen show, you would put that. And I kid you not, 3 days later, it was out there. Devon said he's gay and he's going to be on the RuPaul drag queen show. And I'm like, you guys are idiots, man. I am not gay. I was not going to be on the RuPaul drag queen show. I was saying that to make a point, and you proved it by
yeah.
just putting it out there for no reason, just so you can get a headline.
Well,
You know,
what's so funny about some of those guys is, one in particular who I won't name, but the guy's been wrong so many times. I don't understand why we still believe what he says.
yeah,
You know what I
it's
mean?
because people are going to want to believe negativity.
Yeah.
That's all it is to it. If it's negative, they want to believe it, but if it's positive, they don't care.
Mhm,
They don't care. Like I said, me teaching, people that you should go to a reputable school, a person that's been somewhere and can tell
mhm,
you how to get there and how to do it, as
mhm,
opposed to someone that's never been there. That's what you should be printing, not
mhm.
the garbage that you see out there.
Yeah,
So, you know, they'll always be out there. They'll always, look at you and I and go, F those guys. They don't know what they're talking about, but we do. But
yeah.
there's not enough of us, there's not enough people like you and I that won't tell these
Mhm.
people to go to hell. That's
Right.
the problem.
Mhm.
So you always get the people that want to believe the negativity of what's going on and this and that. The whole thing with the CM Punk thing, I wasn't in the company,
Mhm.
really didn't know what was going on, so I'm not going to make pass judgment on it. I've
Right.
never met the man before.
Mhm.
Some of the things that I was hearing, did I agree with? Sure. Was there some things that I didn't agree with? Sure. But again,
Mhm.
that's my opinion. It doesn't
Mhm.
reflect on AEW, CM Punk, or the company or Tony Khan in a whole. It's just what I feel is my business. But I'm not going to sit here and plaster it out so people can hear and pass judgment on it. I'm not
Sure.
going to do that, but people do that anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Let me ask you the last few minutes we have. I wanted to ask you three questions that I ask everybody. The first one
No, I'm
being,
not gay.
yeah. Well, here's the first question: is that what would you consider being your biggest success in life?
My biggest success in life, I'm going to have to say, which is for me is my kids and being there for every single one of their births, being a great father and being in their lives and them knowing what type of person their father is, someone that
Mhm.
they can be proud of. My father sold drugs. He was a big time drug dealer in New York, next
Mhm.
to one of the biggest drug dealers of all time, Nicky Bonds, and he was like his right hand man. And back then, in the 70s and 80s, people looked up to people like that. And
Mhm.
now, of course, a lot of them are dead or in
Mhm.
jail. And I never wanted my kids to ever think that their father was going to be that type of person. And so
Mhm.
I did the opposite. I'm a small kid from Brooklyn, New York, that made it big and wanted them to be proud of that. And all the hard work that I did to get to this level paid off.
Mhm.
And were there bumps in the road? Absolutely. Was the storm bigger than what I expected sometimes? Yes. But I plowed right through it with the help of God, and my belief in God is very strong.
Mhm.
I believe that, without him, I would not have gotten as far as I am and
Mhm.
still going strong. My belief in the church is very strong. I come from a biblical background. My stepfather came in at the right time when he
Mhm.
married my mom, and I grew up in a very, very religious home.
Mhm.
So my mother being a reverend, and my father, right before he passed away in 2003, became a bishop. Uh,
Wow.
and my mother took over the church and passed it over 500 members in Harlem, New York. She's the first African American woman to do that in New York City, in Harlem. And so I was very proud of her accomplishments because, again, we came from the projects. We had nothing. She was pregnant at 15, had me at 16. And so that's a story right there that isn't supposed to, go well. But we turned a
Yeah.
negative and made it into a positive. Not only was she successful, her name is Dr. Renee uh, Washington Gardner. And,
Wow.
she became a huge success and her son became a huge success. She's had 4 kids and they're all successful.
Yeah.
One followed in my stepfather's shoes. Another one's a banker. Another one is a fitness. I like to say guru. No,
Yeah.
but he's like a fitness one of fitness top trainers in Carolina. I mean, they're all successful. So my mother did a great job in raising all of her kids. And again, a success story, not a tragedy. It
You
could
know,
have
it's
went that way, but it didn't.
what's amazing about that, and this is something that I find is really interesting about successful people. Most of the time, you hear these stories about one percenters and you hear these stories about, oh, they got a leg up. Most of the stories that I hear on this podcast, this is like I'm over 100 podcasts now, and a lot of these people are successful. They all came from that.
Hmm.
They all came from a situation where they had to be successful.
Yep.
And there's something about that where you need to find that extra gear that it has to be a place where like you have to get it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's not something you're in a place where you have to dig a little deeper to get there. Your mom clearly found it, and now all of you found it. And I think that's the true story of Devon Dudley right there.
Yeah.
Is that you came from that, and now you've passed it on to your kids. Here's
Yeah.
the next question I have for you, real quick. What is your biggest failure in life, and what do you think you've learned from
I don't know if I had any real failures. I mean, because like again, I had a lot of success. Um, I think it took me 3 tries. I like to
it?
say two because the second marriage should not have been.
Just
I
we're
regret.
just gonna account.
I
We're not gonna count that one.
I'm not even gonna count that one. But my first wife, she was a hell of a woman, and I basically did wrong
Mhm.
during the Attitude Era. I had my, faults, as you can call it. Being on the road and traveling, and I did wrong. And to this day, I apologize to her. But I was a boy. I thought I was a man back then, but I was a boy. It took me
Mhm.
a long time to grow up. And
Mhm.
it took my wife now to show me that.
Mhm.
And, my media, my social media, Twitter, I really don't go on Twitter that much, although I have it and I have a lot of fans on it. I really don't go on. I go on Instagram a lot.
Mhm.
Uh, and I do nothing but post and brag about my wife and my kids. And that's the way I feel. So I think
Mhm.
my biggest failure was messing up in the very beginning,
Mhm.
coming into this business, not being a man, but still being a little boy. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of people in this business that's still a little boy and that
Mhm.
still do wrong, by their families and this and that. And I know I was one of them and I was big time, but I've learned.
Mhm.
I've learned how, to become a man.
Mhm.
Again, my wife has taught me that. My kids have taught me that. And, God Himself has taught me that, and how to just be a respectful individual and learn how to take care of my family the right way and be respected, not only through my kids, but my wife. So I'm very grateful for her for showing me that. And, because it could have led to a life of tragedy in a sense, because, you know, three failed marriages could have been really bad, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, that's the unfortunate part. But there was only two. But I
Mhm.
recognize my faults in my first marriage. I
Yeah.
recognize that, and I've also, like I said, I'm not too prideful to say, the things that I've done that I'm not proud of. That was my biggest failure. But I'm so
Mhm.
glad that I was able to talk to my boys and, explain to them how wrong I was and don't follow in my footsteps, but follow in my footsteps now, not from the
Mhm.
past, but where I'm going in the future.
Yeah. That's one thing that I think is important message to share is that you're never too old to learn, and there's no
Hmm.
failure that you can't learn from and overcome. And it sounds like you have, and I think it's really cool that you're willing to own your own mistakes. A lot of people aren't. So I
Yeah.
just commend you that, a lot of people would come on here and kind of dance around the issue and maybe say something different. But the fact that you say that is really big of you to come on a public podcast and say that. I think that says a
Hmm.
lot about your character. Like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. And so I have just one last question for you. Um, One day down the road, you're going to pass away and there's going to be a funeral and someone's going to give your eulogy. What would be the one thing you hope somebody says about you in your eulogy?
That I did things my way.
Mm,
That I don't want people to feel sad or say, oh my God, what a tragedy. I want them to understand that a small kid from Brooklyn, New York, that was born in the projects from a teenage
mm,
mother whose
mm,
life should have been a tragedy became a success. And he did nothing. He did everything there was, I should say, to make it,
mm, mm,
and became successful, regardless of how tough it might have been, regardless of how the road might have turned out. He turned a negative into a positive. He kept God in his life and still kept moving forward. And I think that's one of the things that I've always said, that I want people to remember, that no matter what, don't feel sorry for me, but know that I did things my way in terms of being successful and becoming a successful story. So yeah, that day will come, and I've thought about that many a times, especially after my stroke in 2019. There has never been a day that's gone by that I have not thought about it. What would
mm,
happen if I passed on? I'm leaving a legacy that will be, a good one, a great one, that I can be respected by my peers, my family, and that people can actually say, great job, well done. And, I'm just happy to say that I was able to accomplish that. And, I just hope my kids can follow in my same footsteps and realize that the mistakes I made, don't do the same thing, do the opposite.
yeah, man. Well, I appreciate your time. I'm going to have to schedule another podcast with you so we can talk about everything other than wrestling because I am so interested in so many things that you said. I was like, at the last 10 minutes, I'm like, damn it, there's so many things I want to talk to you about your origin story and all these things. So we'll definitely have to do this again. And of course, if I get Carl Weathers, I'm bringing you on. I want to hear you're a Rocky fan too. We're going to do that for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Listen.
Oh
to
shoot.
the king of Sting. I want it all.
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, listen, we'll definitely do that. I appreciate your time. Where can people find you?
Well, they can find me on Instagram at Testify Devon.
Mhm.
Um, they can also find me on Twitter at Testify Devon. My
Mhm.
Facebook is private to my friends and family only.
Mhm.
So that's private. Also, they can find me on DDA, which is Devon Dudley Academy, my wrestling school in Winter Park, which is 3 minutes away from the Performance Center.
Mhm.
We have a lot of great people that work out there. We have some NXT stars that come in. We have some main roster people that come in and do things with our students and try to get themselves into better shape when they can't use the PC or what have you. They'll call me and come down to the wrestling school. I'm pretty much all over that. And in terms of that social media, we have a special now going on. It's $1,000 for 12 months for one
Mhm.
year, paid up
Mhm.
in full at my wrestling school. If you do it before January 9th, but after January 9th, it's 1,500 for the year, and uh, that's for one year, and it ends on the 31st of January. Normally, it's 3,500 for the year.
Yeah,
It's 500
I was gonna
now.
say, but for those who don't know, that is a steal.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
yeah,
you could a
yeah,
year for $1,000, because I mean the cardio you get out of a pro wrestling, I mean ring shape, ring shape is very different than an elliptical or a treadmill. You know what I mean?
absolutely,
Yeah, that's it.
absolutely,
It's rough, man. Johnny had us doing an hour of cardio before we even got in the ring, and it was like
absolutely.
it was the most brutal running the ropes. I was, doing doing quarter rolls, forward rolls, backward rolls, bumps, flip bumps. I mean, just like for an hour. I mean, just to the point where you're ready to throw up before you even get in the ring. You know,
Look, and
so
some of the stuff I put my students through, I'm like, damn, I'm glad I didn't do this when I was coming.
you need that though. You know what I mean? I had Ken Shamrock on.
Absolutely.
I had Ken Shamrock on, and he said something really interesting. He said most of the people, at least in MMA, they blow up, and that's why they lose. So
Hmm.
he's like, I just knew I was never gonna lose because I didn't have the cardio. So
Right.
yeah. So anyhow, Devon, it's been a pleasure. Like I said, we're definitely gonna have to do this again. I want to hear your origin story, and like I said, we're gonna make that Carl Weathers thing happen. So
All right.
for those of you who've listened, subscribe. We got a lot more coming up. Devon, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.